Welcome to Perspectives from WFSU Public Media. I'm Tom Flanagan. The program using the Zoom platform for what we believe is the final time, pre-recorded on Tuesday, July 27th for playback on Thursday, July 29th. The show to be aired on WFSU FM. We'll also have it archived on WFSU.org. Well, let's see. I've got my backpack. I've got my marbleized notebooks here and my folders. I have some colored pencils, and I got a protractor. I'm good to go, by gosh. It's going to be back to school time all across Leon County here in just a matter of days, really. But, you know, amidst all the excitement and the back to school thing that we go through as parents, and the kids certainly go through, and anticipating that face-to-face return to interaction. There's also a bit of trepidation, we must admit, because the local COVID case circumstances are again becoming very uncertain, and we do see rising trends, and that adds some new elements, of course, of caution and uncertainty to the equation. So what better way to address those and, of course, other matters concerning the education of our kids in these interesting times is it to talk with some of our community's most influential educators. So let's welcome to Perspectives in alphabetical order, Jason Plum, Director of the Cornerstone Learning Community. Jason, it is good to see you getting in a few final moments here before returning to the fray, right?
That's right. Thanks for having me, Tom. I appreciate it.
It is so good to see you. We also, of course, welcome back to these microphones, Rocky Hanna, Leon County Schools Superintendent. And Mr. Superintendent, good to see you. You look excited.
Looks can be deceiving. No, I am excited, Tom. Excited to be on the show with you today to share with our community some of our thoughts as we reopen our doors here in the next couple of weeks.
We appreciate your being on. We also extend appreciations to James Milford, head of school at Maclay School. And Mr. Milford, it is good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Tom. Pleasure to be here.
Let's just kind of go around the table. And again, because we are looking at circumstances that are changing literally hour by hour, we must emphasize to anyone listening to this program that there could be changes even between a few days ago when this was recorded and when it's actually hitting the airwaves right now. But just quickly, Jason, what is the situation for Cornerstone right now? Things like masks and social distancing and any other precautionary protocols that you're looking at as of this moment for a return to school?
Yeah, so like James and Rocky, student safety is at the top of our priority list. And so for us, we're just following every CDC guideline. What the scientists say, we do. So masking indoors will still be a thing. And it's looking like even for vaccinated students, they'll be masking inside. Continuing physical distancing. We will allow some students closer than 6 feet because we know how safe it is, and continuing with our air filtration, ionizers in the HVAC units and air purifiers in the classrooms. And continuing to find opportunities for students and teachers and people to connect while still maintaining those safe mitigation measures in terms of hand washing, you know, all the things that we need to do that we know to stay safe, all the tools that we have, we'll be putting those back in place. The only thing we're not doing is any sort of travel restriction, but all the other things that we did last year, we'll do again this year.
Okay, great. Superintendent Hanna, any change from those sorts of protocols as far as Leon County School District is concerned?
First, let me say how much I can empathize with Jason, James, and the other school leaders in our community in both our public and private schools. We're just the lucky individuals who are stuck in the middle of a very politicized and contentious pandemic. And so those of you that want one of our jobs here, come on, get a little taste, come to one of our board meetings. And we all have different boards, but to Jason's point, you know, the protection of our students is first and foremost job one. We did, however, make a change, and we have decided to make masks strongly recommended for those individuals who have not been vaccinated, but optional. It has not come without controversy. I did that based on a lot of the numbers that I've seen coming from the Leon County Health Department as far as the hospitalizations rates of children ages 5 to 11 who are not yet eligible to be vaccinated. So we have made mask optional, but strongly recommended for those who have not been vaccinated. Of course, we're trying to encourage as many folks as possible to be vaccinated that are 12 years of age or older. But again, it has not come without a price. But I will say also, Tom, before we turn it over to James, that in my opinion, you can't make a decision for the good of the whole based solely on the conditions of the few. And so I've been up many nights thinking about this, thinking about the reopening. It's like a movie. We had a movie from the beginning of the pandemic through the close of school last year, and now this is the sequel. And so we have, the same characters, the same actors, and a lot of the same challenges we faced before. But I will say, all in all, this summer is a lot better than last summer. Last summer, there was so much anxiety, so much fear of the unknown that although we are still having talks about the protocols and practices we had in place and will continue to have, there's not nearly the fear, especially now that we have a vaccine, in our community for those that are eligible.
Okay, Mr. Milford, as far as Maclay is concerned, you don't have the same kind of prescriptions that the public school system has. You can have perhaps a little bit more discretion when it comes to what you do, but what is the situation at Maclay as you head back into the classrooms?
So I suppose I'll answer it in talking, and I know Jason and Rocky do the same thing. It's really about a layered approach. And our approach is not that much different than any other school. So what the CDC recommends is, you have all of these pieces that you can build your plan on. And all of our schools, and kudos to Rocky because he has the most diverse schools, we can pull off different things based on our building, our classroom size, our staffing, all of those things. For us, same thing, air filtration, distancing is very important. Even last year, we were not always able to pull off 6 feet, but distancing is extremely important. Mirroring the public school system, we did go mask optional early summer when the COVID cases were very low. We remain mask optional and would like to be there as we start the school year. But again, as we think about building this mitigation protocol, I think all of us have that similarity. Maximizing outdoor space where you can, thinking about where you're eating lunch and where you're eating snacks, thinking about vaccinated, unvaccinated people, thinking about airflow. And I'll also just echo all of the attention that the faculty and administration, I know we've all been working all summer to try to figure it out. And it seems like a moving target sometimes. But I know I also speak for every administrator in Tallahassee and everywhere else as we're watching. And ultimately, we want to do what is child-centered because ultimately, that's what it's about. It's how can we make the experience in the classroom for the student and excellent and give them as much of an uninterrupted educational experience as we can. One of the things that we just released today, last year we had a virtual option and basically just a vision in and outside of each one of our classrooms. And we repealed that a little bit. It was very difficult in the lower school from a developmentally appropriate standpoint. It's tough. It's tough on the teachers. And it's tough, and I don't necessarily think reasonable to expect a 6-year-old to sit in front of a device for 6 hours, right? But what we have done is today we released a modified concurrent virtual classroom to bring that back, just to add another layer of choice for our families. So that's one of the recent changes we've made that's actually taken us back to the formula that worked really well for us last year.
That's a great segue to the next thing I wanted to know. We'll stay with you if we can, Mr. Milford, since you kind of broached the subject here. As you look ahead to options that you may have to put in place depending on circumstances, we saw what happened with Tallahassee Memorial reinstituting its COVID ward in essence recently. At what point do you say, hey, we're going to have to go back to some kind of a hybrid or even a fully virtual scenario as far as Maclay is concerned? Do you have that in place?
So from a McClay standpoint, well, I'll back out just a little bit and just say how proud I am of our region and our public schools for getting kids in classes last year and giving that an option. I talked to colleagues across the nation, and it certainly saddens me that there is a significant portion of students last year that never saw their school, that were never able to connect. And I know all of us believe that it's the connections that make it meaningful. So for us, we have always shied away from saying, okay, this is the number that's going to be the trigger for us, because life's just not that simple. It's just not. And it's a multivariate or a multivariable equation that you have to look at. So for us, we pull as much data out of the state that we can. Look here locally, at least for McClay, we prioritize the visibility of what's going on in Leon and the surrounding counties, not necessarily what's going on in the state, not necessarily what's going on in the nation. What's happening in Tennessee really doesn't matter with my population. So it is, we try to be very transparent with our families and let them know what triggers we could pull. Again, it's a layered approach. So each one of those things you can change here and there. And again, I think in the school's purview, you have these levers to pull. And then on the outside, there's a lot of conversation. And Rocky mentioned sort of the political aspect of all of that. We try to scrub all of that out. And let's think about what's going on, what's best for the kids, what are we seeing here in terms of COVID, what did we see and what did we learn empirically in our school system and our buildings last year? What did we see over the summer? What are we seeing now? And that's the nice thing about the school systems that we have here is we can be nimble. Each one of Rocky's schools can be nimble and adjust as they see fit in ways that they're allowed to. Same thing with Jason's school. So for us, I do have parents who want a number. When we get this positivity rate, what will happen? And I've just found it's not that simple, and we want to be thoughtful and responsive, because when you pick a number, sometimes you could overreact and sometimes you could underreact.
Sounds like one of those absolutely horrific equations that I used to see in advanced algebra, which I totally blew. It was horrific. Jason Flom, as far as Cornerstone, same kind of thing. You're just trying to be as nimble and flexible as you can be as the different information comes into you, or do you say, hey, we get that, now we're going to do that?
Yeah, like James said, there's so many different variables. Almost the answer to every COVID-related question is it depends on so many different factors. And like Rocky Hanna put in his recent Tallahassee Democrat post, we have incredible leaders in all of our different schools who are making those on the ground floor decisions that we have to rely on. We're not offering a digital academy this year. It was a nightmare for teachers and for students and families. Just being able to keep it up and we've learned a lot over the past year since March 2020 when we knew nothing, and now we know a lot about how we can run schools safely and successfully in order to take care of our teachers as well, because they're fatigued and tired just the same as all the administrators all around the world, really. So needing to put things in place that help to make the teaching profession sustainable is an important piece. But in terms of what would have to happen for us to quarantine a class or to go back to a hybrid model, it would have to be an incredible episode for something like that to happen at this point, just because we know so much more and the testing is out there and we know how to keep people safe. So we're in a much better position than we were last year at this point.
Well, that's certainly to be hoped. But to your point then, and we'll defer to Superintendent Hanna on this one here. You said you can make those determinations literally school by school, depending on the circumstances. And the district, has a lot of Chromebooks out there to help if you have to go back. But still, we're dealing with a variant that might be a lot more, as the science says, infectious and more apt to propagate itself throughout the population than maybe what we've seen before. So you've got to be looking at that too and going, whoa, We just have to be ready for whatever comes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to hear from Rocky and James on this, but finding substitutes right now is extremely difficult because who wants to go into a classroom after a teacher's tested positive? No one wants that job. I get ghosted on interviews all the time. So I'd be interested to hear how y'all are doing, but that's one of the things that could potentially shut down a classroom or part of a school is if we just don't have people to be in a classroom.
Rocky, we'll defer to you here because you've got a lot more teachers and substitutes and other staff to worry about in this thing.
Well, to Jason's point, we've learned a lot over the course of the last 18 months. When this first happened and we went home on March 13th, Friday the 13th of 2020, I came back to my office and I pulled out the superintendent's handbook and I looked for the chapter of how to deal with a global pandemic, and there wasn't a chapter. Now, there will be now for whoever's next, and we haven't finished it yet. Hopefully we'll finish it soon. But we have learned a lot. And what we pulled off last year, whether it was us in our traditional public schools or Jason or James at Maclay, was nothing short of miraculous. James mentioned that we're hundreds and hundreds of school districts across the country that were shuttered for the entire school year last year. Kids haven't been in school, many of them, since March of 2020. But we opened our doors. We gave our parents and families choices and options, those that wanted to come back. We welcomed back with open arms last August. That was the governor's desire. We talked a lot about funding, and not to make this a political issue. Had the governor not weighed in at all, it was absolutely the right thing to do to open our doors in August. I firmly believe that. I will always believe that. Although, again, last summer, our parents were happy because we were giving them choices and options. Our employees, however, were scared to death to come back to school, to come back to work. But again, we learned a lot. We broke down over 9,000 desktops. We broke down every desktop we had in our inventory to give out to kids that were at home for remote learning until our Chromebooks arrived before Christmas. I mean, there was a lot of work that went in, but we, again, are such better prepared this time, this fall, than we were going into last fall. So we are paying attention. We work very closely with the Leon County Department of Health when it comes to contact tracing and enforcing quarantine protocols, which is killing all of us really with the continued quarantine protocols going into this fall, that kids in close contact have to, if they're unvaccinated, especially our young children, have to be at home for 2 weeks. But we are positioned in a much better place than we were last year. But again, I'm just so proud of our school administrators, our teachers, to ask them to do that hybrid model again this year. I couldn't. And although we all, public, private, charter and otherwise, did our very best to engage those kids that were physically in our classes as well as those kids that were remoting in, it was tough. I went into some primary classes and the teacher was, the kids that were remoting in, it was, Susie, leave the puppy alone. Johnny, put the scissors down. Stephen, please sit up in bed. Sit up in bed, son. I mean, it was just so much management. Those poor kids that can barely stay focused while they're in school, much less trying to do it like we are here, Zooming. And so I'll use my wife, Christy, a sixth grade science teacher, as an example. She had 15 kids that were physically in class, another 8 that were remoting or Zooming in, and to engage both of those groups simultaneously was quite a challenge. And I just couldn't in good conscience do that to our teachers again. I think we would have had a revolt on our hands. We did it for that 1 year so kids kept that connection to their home zone school. But this year we're still giving families choices and options. And those that aren't in a good place, we are trying to divert to Leon Virtual School, who has been named the #1 virtual franchise in the state of Florida if they want to continue to distance learn because they just aren't in a good place still. We started last year, of our 30,000, 20,000 were at home and 10,000 were in school. During the course of the school year, we flipped, where 20,000 were in school and 10,000 were at home. So we still have 10,000 of our children that haven't been in school since March of 2020. Now, we're hoping all of them will return this fall. We're very optimistic now. Then we face an uptick, reopening of the COVID wing in the hospitals, the Delta variant, again, a lot more fear and anxiety. But I keep going back to what I said with the interview with the Democrat. When this we were rolling into last fall, we didn't know the impact this was going to have on school-age children, the virus itself, and if they were going to act as super spreaders. Neither one of those things came to bear. We, again, have seen 0 hospitalizations in Leon County for children the age of 5 to 11, only 4 hospitalizations with 0 deaths of ages 12 to 18. So it has not, this virus, for whatever reason, has not had the adverse impact on school-age children as it has on, people my age. And it's also been proven that these children are not acting as super spreaders. They're not taking it home to mom and dad and grandma and grandpa. So, and we're very thankful for that. So those are the numbers that I rely on. But if we see, because of a new variant, man, our kids are getting sick. Our kids are now going to the hospital. We have the ability to adapt and adjust. But like Jason and James both said this, I don't want to put a metric on it. I don't want to say this is the number of the positivity rate, this is the number of the hospitalizations, because everything, if we learn anything, everything is very fluid and always changing, and we are constantly adapting to those changes. But we are positioned going into this August in a much better place than we were last August, no matter what happens.
Rocky, does that also include staffing, whether it be teachers or support staff in school or administrative staff or whatever? It's hard enough just finding someone to populate a restaurant at this point. How are you doing for
we had a teacher shortage crisis well before the pandemic. We had a substitute teacher crisis well before the pandemic. This only exacerbated those problems. And so the subs, most of them are retirees. They're older individuals. They are all excited about coming in, and I've increased sub pay from $10 an hour to $14, but even $14 an hour, they're like, I'm good, man. So we, are trying to do the best we can to operate within the protocols of the CDC and the health department to keep our children and our employees safe, and also keeping our schools open and operating. But yeah, whether it's hiring teachers, hiring paraprofessionals, substitute teachers, bus drivers, we have a huge bus driver, food service workers. It's just, like it is with other industries in Leon County in the state of Florida, and I would say throughout the country.
James and Jason, you guys okay as far as staffing goes, or are you still hurting too?
I'll go ahead and jump in. It's certainly tight. We're still looking for a few positions. As Rocky said, this is not a new issue. It was just something that was accelerated and exacerbated by COVID. One of the great things about people who work in schools is we're just about willing to do anything. So the only way we made it through last year was I had office staff doing lunch duty or playground duty. And, I was in corners of the school that I typically are not, and that's okay. And I think we're going to do what it takes to take care of our kids. But I do believe there's a longer term issue that all in education have to figure out, and it's just the sustainability of the career and making sure that it's valued. And but one of the things that we're focusing on here, and I would say really shifted to last year, was just the mental health, social emotional wellness of our faculty and staff in general. So one of the things that we did, we shifted pretty quickly back in March, and our rallying cry was to battle isolation and promote connections. And that's another thing. Educators in general love to connect. And all of a sudden we made them go home. Right. And you have to connect over Zoom, which is great for some people, but it's so very hard. Masks, barriers, distancing, all of those things work against those things that really help our faculty, specifically our faculty and staff, recharge and be able to be present and pour into our students. So we spent a lot of time and resources last year trying to think about and researching how do we love on our faculty? How do we take care of them? How do we support them? Whether that be time, whether that be, depending on their family. So as we move forward to this year, that was already high on our list, but now you just add the additional anxiety of everything that you listed, Tom. It's all the more important, and it's not going away. At least the way I view it is, it's always been there, but I believe it's going to stay on the top of my list for a long time, just trying to care for my faculty as best as I can.
And Jason Flom, you don't have quite as many personnel. to be concerned with as James or certainly Rocky, but how's Cornerstone?
We're doing pretty well. We're like James, and I'm sure like Rocky, we're still hiring for a few positions for the fall, which is coming pretty quickly down the pike. And it's been funny because, I mean, I'm one of the founding faculty at Cornerstone, and we still have some founding faculty, and we typically have people for a long time, but we lost, more people in the past year than we normally do. So it's made for some strange mid-year hires during a pandemic, and trying to onboard new folks. It tends to be a complicated procedure because, like James was saying, this year in particular is an incredibly isolating year for our educators, they needed to keep their cohorts separate from other cohorts. They needed to kind of stay away from, teachers that they care about and that they normally connect with, having all staff meetings via Zoom. So it just further exacerbated that. Sorry for the noise behind me. There's a Jeep pulling in. So finding ways to help people reconnect is an important piece, and making the profession seem like it's a safe, valuable place for people to spend their time is a part of it. And that emotional well-being that we need to be thinking about for our students, we need to continue to think about in terms of our faculty, because if we're expecting them to continue to nurture students at the level that they need to nurture an entire community that's been traumatized to some level or another, and different levels for different people. We know that this has exacerbated the inequity in our systems entirely. So making sure that we're nurturing and caring for our teachers' well-being so that they have the space and they're able to be in the place to care for the students' emotional and social well-being as we're trying to reconnect at a time that we're still asking them to be physically distant.
This is our special Back to School edition of Perspectives from WFSU Public Media. Just heard from Jason Flom. He's the head guy over at the Cornerstone Learning Community. Rocky Hanna, the superintendent of schools for Leon County. James Milford, the head of school at Maclay School. And Mr. Milford, I know you have to bail here for another obligation coming up, so I wanted this next question to go to you first. This is about the impact that the preceding 18 months has had on students. Even the most well-equipped and conscientious and super smart kids have had some stumbles along the way. What kind of programs do you have available at Maclay to help any kids who have fallen behind get back up on track and recover any of that lost momentum?
So I'll take that in two parts. One, I am constantly amazed at the resiliency of our children. So that's one thing. If you look back through history is not easy. And so I certainly have faith in humanity and our children. And I saw how they came back to school last year. And you had to, because they had masks on, you had to look at their eyes, but they're smiling, they're happy, they're there, they're making it. So I have faith in that resiliency. From a Maclay standpoint, we refer to it as our Center for Academic Excellence, and it's our monitoring arm. Does a lot of things here, but it's our monitoring arm for our students to make sure that we're proactive to see where the students are struggling here or there. That's one of the things that I think we do really well here. Just all of our school system, or Rocky school system, and Jason and my school. We focus on the students, and we want to notice. We call them camouflage kids here. It's really easy to come into a school system and do a little bit more than the bare minimum, and maybe you're not necessarily pushing either side or either one of the edges, and just mark time as you go through. I think with great educators who can focus, who feel supported, you notice students like that. So it's, as we look back on the last 18 months, I've been extremely impressed with how our students showed resiliency. We talked to our students a good bit about their own mental health, about them advocating for themselves. If they're struggling, here are the support structures that you should ask for. And ultimately, as parents, I mean, I've had 3 kids go through the school systems here. You're just hoping for charismatic adults that are taking notice and an active interest in your child. And we can build great systems and great institutes, but ultimately it comes back to great faculty who care And I think all three of us on this call have great people doing all those things.
So it's just a matter then of having that perception, that sensitivity on the part of faculty and other staff members at the school to say, hey, here is an individual child who is having some challenges. We need to drill in a little bit deeper here and all come to the fore to help out in that regard.
Yeah, and I think it can be faculty, but in our systems, well, at least in the Clay system, I'll speak for us. In a given day, the coach or the director of an arts program may spend more time with that child than a given teacher. So it's important that you think about everyone in your system. And ultimately, will you be noticed, right? So that's what we want to do. We want to partner with parents. I mean, that's another big piece. It is a partnership. And I think all of us, Rocky talked about the manual. I joke and I'm like, look, this is my first pandemic. I'm learning as I go. And so I think we have to be vulnerable. We have to be humble. We have to just keep the student-centered focus for it. And as we move forward, put the systems, put the people in place to notice and then rally around those students that need the support as you go.
James Milford, the head of school of McClay School, thank you for taking time to join us today, sir, and we'll let you get on to your other appointment that you have. We appreciate you. And happy back to school time for McClay. Thank you, sir.
Take care, James.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Well, great year.
Okay. Well, Rocky, let me go over to you because you've got the same kind of situation here. Some kids who are facing challenges. You also have some schools that are facing some challenges as well. And I'm thinking like, oh, I don't know, Hartsfield and Oak Ridge and Riley and Bond and Pineview that are sort of, they're trying really, really hard, but they're sometimes missing the mark on that. What kind of programs does the district have to help out not just the kids, but maybe those struggling schools as well, as you try to bring this back to a more normal kind of school year?
Last year we spent a lot of time, Tom, focused on the social and emotional well-being of our children. We were struggling as adults. Imagine what our kids were, how they were dealing with this. And I saw a lot of those elementary students that were very isolated, sitting in a corner, sitting 6 feet apart, had their mask on, but that took its toll on them as well. So we spent a lot of time last year focusing on our kids to make sure they were in a good place, a good, safe place, physically and emotionally. We didn't focus as much on standardized testing and getting ready for standardized testing and a lot of the standards. There was a lot of academic rigor that happened, but in addition to that, there was a lot of just making sure we were all good, the adults and the children. We did have a drop in third grade reading scores. I honestly expected it to be worse than it was. We're going to have the rest of our scores come out the end of this week potentially, but we were not focused. And I told our principals, don't worry about it. We have to keep everyone safe from the virus. Yeah. Then we have to make sure everyone's in a good space and a good place emotionally, dealing with the virus, both in school and at home. Then we talk about instruction. So rolling into this year, again, we have 10,000 students that potentially are returning that have not been in school in over a year and a half. So we have to do a wellness check with them. Are you good? Are you in a good space? Are you okay? And then we'll start getting into the standards and talking about preparing academically for the assessments in the spring. We did have a summer 850 program. We identified kids that had suffered a large amount of academic regression during the course of the pandemic. We contacted their parents and invited them to a summer program in all of our elementary and K-8 schools. Our middle schools were doing credit retrieval. We had a program for high school. So we had programs in pre-K-12 throughout the summer for identified students that had suffered a lot of academic regression throughout the course of the pandemic. We'll roll that into the fall, begin to do assessments to see exactly where each child is, and then to build an education plan around where they are when they return to us in August. But again, kudos to our school administrators and to our teachers. We have a very healthy public school system, private school system. We have a very healthy all-encompassing school system here in Leon County. And that's because we have amazing school leaders, but even better teachers. And I'm just so blessed and fortunate to be part of it. I've been with the school system my entire career. I'm a product of our public schools. I love Tallahassee. I love Leon County. And although it has become contentious, which is disappointing that we have seen even a pandemic draw political lines, and at the end of the day, we're just trying to do the best thing for our kids and to keep them safe and to educate them the best we possibly can. But I would say to the adults, we have to put partisan politics aside, and the enemy is the virus. The enemy is not
Right.
each other and your personal beliefs. And so I'm over all of the arm wrangling and finger pointing. And at the end of the day, we have to protect our neighbors and help each other.
One thing that I am quick to notice, excuse me, as I'm sure anyone listening to this program, is that the interaction, the personal connection between you, Rocky, and James over at Maclay, and Jason at Cornerstone, and I'm sure the folks at charter schools like Arts and Sciences and JP2, and there seems to be more of a collegial and community spirit amongst educators in this town than maybe you might see elsewhere, where there are battle lines drawn between the public schools and the private for-profit charters and the full privates and all that. I'm not hearing any of that here.
Well, I've said that they're all our children. They're all our children. And I have, strong feelings about voucher and charter expansions. But I've told once a charter school is accepted, or we have private schools that come to me need help, at the end of the day, they're a Leon County kid, whether they're public, private, charter, whatever. And we are here all in this together. And I would never turn my back on a child, no matter what school they attended.
Okay, and
Yep.
Jason, for the Cornerstone kids here, a couple of them come back and they are struggling. What do you do? How do you help them out and bring them back into the fold?
Well, before I get to your question, Tom, I just want to say, Rocky, how happy I am to hear you talk about, with your principals, prioritizing the social emotional well-being. I'm speaking as a parent because I have a daughter who's going to be going to Leon starting in the fall, and she's been practicing with the soccer team and already starting to sense that sense of community that they have over there that you helped start. My parents went to Leon, but they sent me to Godby, so I didn't get to be a legacy with them. In terms of students coming back, and we know that there's learning loss, and it can't all be quantifiable. Sometimes what kids learn at these stages, through, for us, pre-K through 8th grade, is about how do we get along? How do we communicate? How do we check for understanding, just in terms of how we solve complex problems with one another? So there's things that we can't easily assess, but there are things that we can. So to meet children where they are, we have to start by figuring out where they are. So having some universal screeners to help us know, where kids are, as well as finding ways to have an accommodation plans for students who need it, who are, falling through. In terms of, we already have a neurodiverse population. We've got, gifted students, we've got students on the spectrum, we've got, like our public schools, we got students who are behind, we have students, with ADHD, we have students who have some Venn diagram of all those things. And then we have, whatever normal kids are. So, much like, Rocky, all the students in Leon County schools, it's a very diverse group. So we've already got a student services program in place that we've had since we started Cornerstone. And so we'll continue to have that. We've increased the number of people working in that program so that we can continue to figure out where students are and then meet them where they are. The goal of having them inspired and empowered requires vigorous learning. And in order to get there, we have to make sure that the tasks we're asking them to do meet them where they're at and have, real world context for them. So having one-on-one times for students to connect with someone else, having small group interactions, having opportunities for having intergrade exchanges so that we can have students who are, who need a little bit more time can work with students who are perhaps accelerating, or students who are accelerating, having chances for them to be challenged in new and authentic ways. We don't yet know what lessons we're going to be able to take from COVID because we're still in it. So our students are continuing to learn. Is just now, how do we capitalize on that learning and get it back on track towards where we're trying to go? And then also, what can we learn from what we've done that makes this time valuable for them? Because they're experiencing something that no other generation's experienced in a lifetime. So there's going to be an indelible mark that has the potential to shape culture in a positive way and shape learning in a positive way.
Teachable moments abound out of this. That is for sure. Well, since we're talking about back to school time, a little public service announcement here. Starting this weekend and for the next 10 days, that is July 31st through August 9th, the state of Florida is featuring a tax holiday on back to school supplies, which includes such staples as clothing, certain electronics, of course, notebooks, and the perennial protractors. Does anyone ever really use those things? I must have 15 stashed away here that I accumulated over the years when I was in school. I don't throw anything away. But speaking of money, back to you, Superintendent Hannah. The state of Florida's Department of Education is, from what we hear now, in receipt of some, $15 billion in federal money to help out local schools when they have to deal with COVID-related expenses. So yourself, other districts, what are you doing to encourage the release of that money to help you guys out as you try to gear back into reality here?
Great question, Tom. We had prepared ourselves financially several years ago in case of an emergency. We built up a very healthy fund balance. We added to our emergency reserve. I'm a very fiscal conservative when it comes to preparing and understanding finances, and that we never know what may happen in the future. And this is a great example of that. So we were prepared financially to withstand the pandemic, although it would have been a really stretch for us. None of us thought that the federal government would just turn the money machine on, but they did. And they have sent resources to help support our local economies and to our local schools. I have expressed my frustration about those dollars and the timeliness of them arriving here to local education agencies. The legislature got their hands on it and decided that they were going to do exercise a power play on the dollars and put categoricals on them. And I think what's ironic to me is the state of Florida, you hear the governor speak of this, to protect the sovereignty of our state. And the state doesn't want to be held to lots of federal regulations and bureaucracy. Well, we feel the same way as a local school district and as a county in Leon County in the city of Tallahassee, that it's fine if we want to say we want to protect the sovereignty of the state, but then just don't turn around and do the same thing you don't want the federal government doing to local school districts and local community. And that's the frustration that I feel, is that we have lawmakers from parts unknown saying, well, the schools, they don't need that money. They don't even know what they would do with that money. That's ludicrous. And the federal government intended those dollars to flow to local communities. But the city of Tallahassee has an allocation. The Leon County has a large allocation, yet Leon County schools still waits. Now, we are encouraged by some recent conversations with the second round of CARES or ESSER money for us, that it is going to become available this summer, but we're about to start school. So I feel some frustration, but again, I just have to, there's some things I can control and some things I can't. Unfortunately, I'm not the governor. I'm not the Speaker of the House or the President of the Senate or the Education Commissioner. I'm Superintendent of Leon County Schools, but part of my job is to continue to advocate for the resources due to our public and private schools here in Tallahassee and Leon County, and I will continue to do that.
And I believe you have a pretty strong advocate there in the State Superintendents Association driver's seat as well, who, if is not able to pry them, at least is able to keep the pressure on the powers that be, both at the Department of Education and in the governor's office. Jason, how's Cornerstone doing financially? You guys okay?
Yeah, we're doing all right. There was a hit in enrollment, but the PPP funds last spring really helped out. And then there's been a recent EANS grant, which is an emergency assistance grant that allows us to be reimbursed for the past year worth of COVID-related costs from, bringing in a whole bunch of sinks to install on all of our porches, to building a big tent over our basketball court, which we affectionately call the courtroom now, and make a big outdoor classroom, and other places where we've had to, make changes to campus. And so the federal government coming through in those two places has been really allowed us to be in a place where we feel very confident going into this fall school year. That is frustrating to hear, Rocky. It's exacerbating thinking about how often politics gets its hands deep into the weeds and doesn't allow for local control when schools know their kids better than anyone else and what their schools need, and to have it dictated by places far and wide away is just, it's troubling and frustrating.
It is frustrating. And let me say this also, that I agreed with I don't agree with the governor all the time, and I don't agree with the commissioner all the time, but I think keeping our schools open last year was absolutely the right thing to do. So even if he hadn't weighed in on that decision, I felt strongly that we should give our parents choices and options, keep our schools open. Those that felt comfortable, our doors would be open. Those that didn't, it wouldn't. But I am concerned about, we see it at the federal level with executive orders. We're seeing it now at the state level with executive orders. They're exercising their will at both the federal and the state level, and almost exceeding, in my opinion, exceeding their authority to dictate how local communities operate. That is very concerning to me.
Well, folks, before we give a few moments here for some wrap-up comments from both of you, this is a special question for you, Mr. Superintendent, from our news director, Lynn Hatter. She's wondering about the status of the after-school program at Bond Elementary. She's had a great deal of interest in that. She said, ask Rocky about that. So I said, yeah, I will.
So, we're going to have conversations. It's alive and well. Tell Lynn we're good. But, there have been some changes here recently in the numbers. We have a call with our elementary folks later this afternoon to potentially look at getting them back in some type of bubble until, things settle down a little bit locally with the new variant, and maybe potentially restricting people that are allowed into the bubble, much like we did last year, at least for the time being. But, we have a school board meeting coming up. We'll have those discussions. We'll have many people from the community weighing in on those discussions. But at the end of the day, we want our kids back to being kids, things back to normal, them breathing air without masks, them being able to go on field trips, them being able to play on playgrounds, and being able to have pep rallies. And, Jason mentioned about his daughter entering Leon High School. I talked to a senior last year from Leon that said, Mr. Hanna, we didn't feel like a class. We were all socially isolated. We felt like we were individuals just graduating from high school, that there was no connection. There was no sense of a class. And this is taking its toll on adults, but it's really, these kids didn't ask for this. And so it's our responsibility to protect them, to keep them safe, while also realizing and understanding that they're kids. And then they will never get this time back in their life. They just won't. But we'll continue to monitor what's going on here in Leon County and make adjustments as necessary. Jason, if we can ever help you, we've always had a wonderful relationship with you guys at Cornerstone. I'm a phone call away. I mean that, if I can help you personally with your daughter, because at the end, we said this from the beginning, we're all in this together. We're all in this together. Let's put the ugliness aside, roll up our sleeves, go back to work, doing what we do best, and that's educating children.
Yeah. Jason Flom, Director of Cornerstone Learning Community. Any final thoughts here? So you got a minute or two to wrap it up, please.
Yeah, I think to Rocky's point, leading with compassion is what we need to be doing now. We've got this global situation going on, so we've got some context for learning about, what is happening the world over, and gives us a chance to capitalize on cultivating empathy, both in terms of our educators, empathizing with each other, but also with students, and being able to connect them around the world, in terms of how do we put context and what sort of experiences are people having, so that the students are seeing that even though we are continuing to keep them distanced and isolated, that they are, we're all in the same storm, but in paddling our own boats. And so how can we lead with compassion so that we can, reach across, our boundaries and find the hidden opportunities herein. And I think, we've got a tremendous community. I'm really fortunate for Tallahassee being the kind of the bubble it is in our wonderful Panhandle area, because we have such visionary leadership leading our students and our schools and working together. And I think that I keep looking for what's the opportunity here? Will kids learn how to read faces better because they've had to just read faces losing just the eyes? And then once they get the mouth too, they're going to be like brilliant savants at reading people's emotions, I'm hoping. But it all comes back to how do we have, compassionate and inspired and empowered leadership. So we really put a global stamp on this experience so the kids leave and grow up with something that they can look back on. What's the story we want them to tell about their time in our school systems during a pandemic? And that's the question I keep going back to and thinking about, how do we manage this, both as a parent, but then also as a school leader.
And Tom, real quick before you sign off, I know you're going, but thank you to WFSU. Thank you to Kim.
Yeah.
You guys have been wonderful supporters and partners with all of our children, all of our schools here in Leon County. And we're very appreciative, very thankful.
Absolutely.
But we appreciate anyone who is laboring in the vineyard of education nowadays. Never an easy task for sure, and now made even more challenging and exhausting. Let's be honest and frank about that. And certainly we'll stay in touch with everyone in our community when it comes to the education of our kids and any information that needs to be gotten out quickly. We're just an email or a phone call away, guys. So again, Rocky Hanna, Superintendent of Schools for Leon County, Jason Flom, Director of the Cornerstone Learning Community, and a little earlier in the program, we heard from James Milford, the head of school at Maclay School, and to all of our educator friends who are listening to this program. Have a good semester, and let's all hope for the very best. And thank you for joining us on Perspectives, produced, by the way, by WFSU Public Media in Tallahassee. Thanks to Evan Rossi, Paul Dam, Amy Diaz de Villegas, Devin Bittner, Brandon Brown, Tricia Moynihan, and Lydell Rawls, our Director of Content. Kim Kelling is executive producer, and I'm Tom Flanagan. After nearly a year and a half of producing this program virtually, Perspectives returns to its traditional live in studio interactive format. Next week, on Thursday, August 5, our in-person panel will be talking then about our juvenile justice system, both locally and statewide, and the latest initiatives to improve that system to help more troubled young people get back on track. That's going to be our next Perspectives, including your live calls and emails next Thursday from WFSU Public Media. Take care.